We begin with UFOs in New Jersey.
What the hell did you just say?
What a fun time to be on the radio. Now, do we know we have UFOs in New Jersey? No. Could be military technology that's well beyond what's been disclosed to the public. Could be foreign entities. I heard one congressman talking earlier about how this could belong to Iran.
That can't be good.
I don't believe we're living in a world where Iran has aerial superiority over every other country on the planet. Okay, I don't know that to be the case. That sounds like the kind of thing that's peddled into the narrative by the defense industry so we can spend more money and buy a bunch of new drones they're trying to sell, or maybe even justify some type of a war with Iran on the way out the door in the Biden administration, because they've certainly been inflaming tensions all over the country. I mean, is it anyone else given any thought to the fact that Syria was engaged in a civil war for 10 years and somehow the rebels just made an 11-day push and ended the whole frickin' thing? I mean,
I think he's got a point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, our tax dollars are heavily involved in both sides of that conflict, which is why we went from cheering the toppling of the Assad regime one day to bombing the people who conquered Assad the very next day.
This is politics as usual.
It's a little of everything as usual, but most importantly, business as usual, because obviously after toppling Assad, they had to make sure that the leftover weapons didn't fall into the wrong hands because we had ostensibly taken him out with terrorists. Okay, the people who have been armed by our tax dollars and the people who ultimately toppled that government have very strong ties to the terror groups in the Middle East, except this time around they're sitting on a government that had an arsenal of chemical weapons. So we did play a little defense and go in there and bomb them back into some point of moderation. But what will ultimately happen in Syria is what happened in the Taliban. Women will lose their rights. Okay, gay people will be whipped and beaten and lit on fire if they dare defy the values of the Sharia law that runs some of these countries. And ultimately, all the people over here who tell you they're, marching at college campuses for goodness, okay, and for tolerance and everything in between, will be doing so in support of regimes that don't support any of their values. None. Do you remember the whole Queers for Palestine thing last summer when we were laughing our ass off at all these idiots? Okay, Queers for Palestine. I mean, really is chickens for Popeyes. Okay, and that was my joke, and Benjamin Netanyahu stole that joke and told it at the UN, if you remember.
That's just how white folks will do you.
I'm just being silly. Shout out to Netanyahu, wherever he is. But as we get this conversation going and we start talking about UFOs in New Jersey, we don't know what they are. Okay, we've heard congressional testimony that they don't know what they are. I got to be honest with you. I don't believe that. I do believe they know, and it's either our technology and they can't say anything. Is there an off chance that it's UFOs and they can't tell us because they don't think we're emotionally capable of dealing with it? Very possible. But I have a hard time believing UFOs are flying all this way and not landing. I'm sure I'm comically wrong, and I could be. And I'm sure there's a person with a security clearance listening to this going, man, that kid, if he only knew. Okay, but understand, until we get some type of an explanation, our government, and maybe they're okay with this, looks kind of incompetent. It looks kind of inept.
We have people in Washington that don't know what they're doing.
Okay, because if it belongs to a foreign entity, should have been shot down already if we have those capabilities. If it belongs to us, yeah, we could say, hey, this is ours, but we can't say why. But we wouldn't want to do that because we'd be divulging our own military superiority, our own classified technology to the rest of the world. So my guess is you're not going to get an answer on this for a little while. Okay, barring it being actual aliens who just announced their presence. At which point, the way this works, if the aliens come here, Kamala offers them free gender reassignment surgery. Biden will throw them a free hotel room, and we'll all be on our way.
Tell them like it is.
So funny. But I don't think we'll get an answer, and I don't think they have to give us an answer. The craziest thing about living today in the world we live in is we don't, as a collective consciousness, hold on to anything. Okay, like to give you an example, did we ever find out what happened to the missing Malaysian plane?
The answer would be no.
The answer would be no. Are we even looking at it? Are we talking about it as a country? No. How about the Las Vegas shooting? It's the largest mass shooting in the history of this country. Is a single solitary person out there right now demanding answer?
The answer would be no.
The answer would be no. It's the biggest mass shooting in the history of the country. We don't know why it happened. We just know that somehow this guy was able to get a militia worth of weapons into a Vegas hotel room at the Mandalay Bay, despite all the cameras and security they have in casinos, given the amount of money flying around. This guy walks right up to his hotel room, which is on about the 34th floor, and has enough weapons to supply Hamas for the holiday season. Okay, insanity is what this guy's sitting on. And we never got an answer. You just kind of move on. We're living in this really wild and fragmented version of humanity where we don't scale anymore. Like the significance of Donald Trump getting shot in the summer of 2024 and us moving on within days or weeks, we don't talk about it. We don't go back and talk about it. A president got shot. And that would matter. The significance of Joe Biden coming off the ballot in the middle of an election year when he got 14 million votes in the primaries.
I don't remember that ever happening.
But it did. Okay, it did happen. He did get those votes. He did come off that ticket. And you just kind of move on. Social media has turned life into a race to the top of Mount Clickmore. And the way you get the most clicks, the way you drive the most engagement is by talking about the freshest thing. So if it's not the freshest thing, if it's not the newest thing, the level of importance, the level of significance doesn't really matter to anybody trying to get those clicks. We got to talk about the new thing. Okay, we got this United Healthcare guy. We move on. Sorry, UFOs. Okay, we got this verdict. We move on. We're done with the UFOs. It's all about the new thing, regardless of whether the new thing is more important than the old thing. And it really is like such a recipe for disaster. But I don't know that they're going to give us an answer on this. I'm going to go, there was a bunch of drones. What are you going to do? Understand, when we had those former military pilots testify that, yes, they had seen unidentified aerial phenomena. They were calling them UAEs. Yeah, and they were flying in front of our fighter jets on and off radar, doing things we couldn't do, flying up to light speed and warp speed, and I can't believe it's not speed and everything in between. And then they were gone, and then they were back, and then they were zigzagging around in the sky like a laser pointer. It was insane. And we were like, wow, that's great. Are they on Twitter? No? Okay, well, we're going to move on. Do they have a TikTok account? Can we follow the aliens on TikTok? No? Okay, we're going to move on. And that's just how it works. We are in a place. That's why it's called permanent audio on this show. I'll be talking about a story. I'll reference an older one and play you audio from a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago, just so we have perspective on what was going on at the time. Maybe a value a politician held that they abandoned. Maybe a collective value we all held that we abandoned. Like the fact that we don't have a collective consciousness is one of the reasons politicians can be as transactional as they are. Here's Robert Wheeler on Capitol Hill, FBI agent, telling you what he knows and what he doesn't know. Clip 31.
Is the public at risk? Is public safety at risk? Are we concerned that there are nefarious intentions that could cause either national security or a public safety incident that would put Americans at risk?
There's nothing that is known that would lead me to say that, but we just don't know, and that's the concerning part.
I mean, what we just...
You gotta do better than that.
But that's the kind of thing that tells me it's just our technology. Here's a little more of this, clip 32.
So the public reports and what we have from eyewitness sightings, some of those very credible police personnel and others are what we describe as unidentified drones. We do not know the particular specifics of what those drones are. Some are described as being slightly larger than a commercial available drone, fixed wing as well as rotary. But as I previously stated, we don't know the people responsible behind that, and that's what we're working on.
Now, is that an acceptable answer?
Not even close.
If you're in a position of leadership in this country, okay, you can't say, I don't know. That's not acceptable. We're the most dominant superpower in the world. We're the most technologically advanced. We're the wealthiest. We're the strongest. Okay, but that, again, makes me believe he's willing to have that egg on his face, that our government's willing to have that egg on their face, because they're ultimately just going to move on from telling us what we deserve to know. Here's Jeff Van Drew in New Jersey also talking about it, clip 33.
It's one of a few things. It could be a commercial enterprise, but the bottom line is no reputable commercial enterprise is going to do anything like this. So then you got to think maybe it's government. Well, the federal government, the Department of Defense, the military is not going to put drones out that are that obvious, that big to extract information without giving you some kind of a notice or warning. So then you're left with, is it a foreign country? And if it is a foreign country, is it adversarial? It possibly could be.
This could be a problem.
Yeah, if it's a foreign country, it is, of course, adversarial, because foreign countries don't have the right to come here and fly over our sovereign territory and terrify citizens while extracting their data. I mean, if it's a foreign country, it speaks to such a brazen lack of respect for the people that are currently running things.
You have no idea how to defend a nation.
None. Okay, which is why I think it's ours. But here is Chris Smith from New Jersey talking about some of the things the Coast Guard witnessed, clip 34.
So last night I was on the beach in Island State Park in Ocean County with the sheriff. He has been working it every single night. He's got his own tethered drones chronicling. One of his officers 2 nights ago saw 50 drones come in off the ocean right there. So we thought maybe they'll replicate it. They didn't, but we thought it was a possibility. Last night we had a number of other people there, including a commanding officer from the Coast Guard, who said that one of their 47-foot motor lifeboats was followed by between 12 and 30 of these drones as they went through the water, followed right behind them.
So think about that. And that's the kind of, en masse type of dronage, if you will, that if it's being done by a foreign entity would absolutely represent a hostile infringement on our sovereign territory. And they would know if it wasn't theirs. That's the point. Our government knows what it has and doesn't have. Does that mean everybody in the government has the same security clearance? Of course not. Okay, if you want to see classified documents, you either got to go to Joe Biden's Corvette or Donald Trump's bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. But outside of those two things, you're not probably going to have access to all the classified information. But getting past the jokes of it all, we know what we possess at the highest levels and most classified levels of government. So if we're not going out and saying it's ours, it's probably because it is. Okay, and if we're not saying it's somebody else's, it's probably because it isn't. But the good news for them is the dog can keep barking, but the circus is just going to leave town because we don't have a collective investment in truth anymore. We just want another, new shiny thing tomorrow to talk about. So until we change that MO, like we're going to stay on this story, we're going to talk about it a week from now, we're going to talk about it a month from now if we don't have an answer, but I can't promise you everybody else is. And that's the scariest part of the moment we're living in right now.
What can I tell you, kid? You're right. When you're right, you're right. And you're right.